You read the title. Crotas End is kinda boring because it's painfully easy. I do admit this is about a free-to-play raid, and obviously a free-to-play raid has to be easy and nervous because free-to-play players cannot get the gear that paying players can. Destiny 2 is basically a pay-to-win game in that way, but that isn't an argument I want to start. My point is that Crotas is just kind of easy. Mechanically and enemy-wise, to where I literally read Jujutsu Kaisen for half of the run I did for this video, and usually just browse Twitter during every other one. I primarily blame the mechanics for this since they just aren't very engaging, but ads are definitely a part of it. So I'm just gonna go over each encounter and talk about it as I go, so we're all on the same page if you haven't done the raid. It also lets me extend the video length, but we won't talk about that part. So, starting off with the entrance, this is just going to teach you the mechanic for the rest of the raid. The chalice mechanic is basically just playing hot potato. Whilst you have the chalice, the bar will slowly fill up, and that is quickened by killing ads. Once the bar is full, you get a timer on screen, and someone has to take it from you, or you die. They then get the chalice, and you get a buff called Enlightened, and a timer before you can take the chalice again. Enlightened will let you activate things around the raid, such as plates, lanterns, and allow you to walk through hive barriers. Here you'll just need to enlighten the plate and the bridge will start forming whilst ads come to attack you. And then any further dunks will increase the speed that the bridge forms. And that's it. It's a fairly simple entrance that I can't really complain about, and it's pretty quick too. It's an entrance I don't really expect it to be breaking the bounds in mechanical difficulty. It also actually teaches you the main mechanic for the rest of the raid and only really leaves one detail out, which is dunking the chalice itself. Dunking the chalice will allow you to get rid of it, but also put a timer on you before you can pick it back up again, and will be important for our next encounter. The Abyss encounter involves traversing through an abyss while thousands of thrall chase you. The abyss is also full of obstacles such as pits and swinging lanterns. And whilst in the abyss, you'll slowly gain a debuff called Way of Darkness, which will slow you down, stop you from sprinting, and using jump abilities. To beat the abyss, you have to take the chalice to each of the dunk spots and then form the bridge by enlightening it, and then standing on the plate until it's formed. Again, you can enlighten it more to speed up the bridge's progress, however there is a dunk spot right next to the bridge, which lets you get rid of the chalice altogether at that point. Enlighten can also be used on each of the lanterns you'll find as you traverse through the abyss, and that lets you light them and get rid of the Way of Darkness debuff. However, as mentioned, your goal is just to reach all of the dunk spots and form the bridge itself. So you can basically just use Strand or Egrudge and a solo warlock to just run through the abyss for 3 or 4 people, and time dunks together to just skip the lighting lanterns bit and make it much quicker, as you have enough time on the wipe timer that also exists to basically just time your dunks correctly to where everyone's timer runs out basically one after another and you can just keep running through the entire time. However, even when you just do it normally, it's still incredibly easy, as the only threat is really the obstacles, which aren't really much of a threat so long as you're actually careful. However, I am not careful. This is really the only encounter that poses any sort of difficulty, just in the fact that people don't want to be there, and therefore just try to brute force it with speed. And then it doesn't really work. It's kind of just an annoying encounter to play because it almost entirely relies on how capable your teammates want to be on that given day. Especially more than usual since they are just waste all your revives from traps, which isn't very fun. And I've had multiple occasions where we've gotten to the end but still wiped due to the shared fates mechanic. However, a benefit of doing it normally is that you'll actually get a decent amount of reading or browsing of Twitter done during this encounter, due to the amount of waiting you'll end up doing on the lanterns and lack of threat from the thrall. Anyway, once you get across the bridge, you'll end up at the next encounter, which involves yet another bridge. The next part of Crow's Bridge, the bridge encounter, involves picking up the chalice and lighting the plate, then passing around in line to everyone. So you can kill the sword bearer and then pick up its sword, bring it across the bridge, and then kill a gatekeeper with it and take the sword. To actually form the bridge, you'll need 3 people and plates. There'll be a set of 2 totems and 8 plates. The plate is again used to make the bridge itself, whilst the totems will open up whilst someone is on the plate and eventually wipe the team if no one is actually standing underneath the totems. The way my teams usually do this is to have someone always stand on the middle plate, usually being myself, as they'll be the last one over. Then have the first person going across pick up the chalice first, and then stand on the plate with the plate guy, get enlightened and use it on the bridge. Then the plate guy will get enlightened, keep it, and the second sword guy will take the chalice from the plate guy, get enlightened, and give it back to the first person going across, and then you just need to get everyone but the last person enlightened. Once that's done, the first sword guy will take the sword and go across with the last person who will still have the chalice on them. The chalice holder will need to dunk the chalice on the other side, and then just help kill ads. Whilst the sword guy will kill the gatekeeper and dunk the sword. Once the sword guy is across, everyone on the other side will then stand on their totem and plate, whilst everyone who was on plate duty can then get off their plates, and you'll then just need to get everyone across. I would also recommend making sure your two best players are always on both sides, which is why I'd make one of them the plate guy and the other one the first sword guy. As you'll end up getting swarmed by lots of hive and two anti-barrier knights that constantly respawn by the end, if you're on the first side. For the rest of the encounter, however, I tend to literally just sit around and not really do much other than kill the few ads that do appear literally as they spawn. I think it would have been actually fun if they could have added way more enemies to the field so you're constantly being overrun, as even though I did say you can deal with them, it's partially because you aren't really dealing with that many enemies for longer than probably 2 minutes and can hide fairly easily. Now if you had to defend the plates of ads crawling all over you for the entirety of the encounter, it might actually be a different story for at least most people. Also, I'd probably spawn the ogres during the actual encounter itself. But again, I can see why that isn't the case. One, you have to think about optimization, because they'd have to add in way more enemies way more often to keep up with us with endgame builds, just to insta-slaughtering them. And Bungie still support last-gen consoles, which definitely won't handle hundreds of ads on screen at once very nicely. And as mentioned before, it is a free-to-play raid and should probably end up being a bit easier. I just kind of don't think it should be easy enough to where I literally spend all but the last couple of minutes of the encounter just browsing whatever on my phone. Run was brain dead easily, but at least I had to do something, and I do admit if I switched to roll I would absolutely see more action. But damn, it's just kind of boring either way. Once everyone is actually on the other side of the bridge, you'll need to kill ads and get enlightened again, by just picking up the chalice again. You only really need a couple people with enlightened, so once 3 people have it, just put the chalice back and kill ads until the ogres spawn. Try to kill them as quick as possible, and then a bunch of gatekeepers will spawn in alongside you being able to pick up the swords again. You just need to kill all of them and then dunk the chalice if you haven't already to complete the encounter. Then the next bit of the raid teaches you about the hive barrier mechanic. You've got to pick up the chalice again and get enlightened to pass through a barrier and kill a shrieker in order to let everyone else through. Once you do that twice, you can dunk the chalice and either jump down to a ute, or if you've done it fast enough, get the second secret chest, then jump down. Once jumping down, you'll then be met with a ute. The ute itself is actually a pretty decent encounter. It starts off with you just having to kill ads until you can enter the center of the room right above where you spawn. That are just from now on called the chalice room. That room obviously has the chalice in it, and it should be grabbed immediately. And whilst charging the chalice and getting people enlightened, you need someone to go scout to each of the towers on the far end of the room and above the chalice room, so you find out what rooms have witches or shriekers in them. The way you do that is just going to the top floor of either tower and jumping as high as possible. If there's a shrieker in the room, it will appear on the radar as a circle, and you'll be able to figure out whether it's below or above you depending on whether there's a arrow inside of the circle. If there's an up arrow, then the shrieker is in the top floor. If there's a down arrow, then it's in the bottom floor. However, the rooms above the chalice room are far easier, as you can just look into them to figure out whichever one is there. The Shrieker rooms are ones you want to avoid, whilst the Wizard rooms you need to go into with Enlightened and kill at about the same time in order to activate the damage phase for EUs. The reason you need Enlightened is so you can pass through the hive barriers that'll be in front of each of the rooms you need to go into. On the first phase there'll be 3 wizards, and on the second there'll be 4, and so on. Then right under spawn where you come out there'll be another dunk spot for the chalice, so you can get rid of it whilst damaging. The extra damage phase itself you want to do in that chalice room, as your use will just hover around there. You'll also have to hit a damage threshold, otherwise your use will just wipe you. She'll also wipe you if you take too long to complete the encounter, just like D1. Then you just need to repeat the same steps from picking up the chalice until she dies from there. I honestly don't have any complaints for Yutes. Her encounter is actually pretty good, which makes sense as it was the most reworked from D1. I can also recommend that you basically just have the entire team in the chalice room for most of the encounter, as all the ads will end up spawning there and charge the chalice quicker. The only people that should really be moving from there are your scouts and whoever has Enlightened. Yutes also has a decent amount of health, but a very long damage phase, which does make it pretty possible for a 1 phase, assuming everyone is on a good damage option. You also want a Divinity user, as he tends to move a lot, and whilst Tractor would be better debuff wise, especially since she'll be right next to a use, hitting shots is arguably much more important. Which is also why I'm using a machine gun, because I cannot aim against wizards. Other stuff like Leviathan's Breath, Sleeper, Whisper of the Worm, and I've even seen Acreus tend to be much better actually damage-wise. So yeah, that's a use. So now we have Crow. Unlike a use, Crota himself is just kind of disappointing, but a very quick encounter nonetheless. To start, everyone stands around Crow's crystal, and once they do that, he'll spawn in. Make your way to the middle of the map and pick up the chalice and get 3 people enlightened before dunking the chalice. The gimmick here is that to switch the chalice you'll have to be in a pillar of light, which can then spawn in any of the 5 places on the map, 2 of which are right next to Crota, who will just be wandering around the upper bridge area. Whilst charging the chalice, you also want to be killing every single ad, as that is how you'll spawn the sword bearers, as the swords are used to take down Crow's shield and allow you to do damage, and you'll need 2 of those to actually break his shield. The last person with enlightenments will be on Oversoul duty. The Oversoul is that big green orb in the background of the entire raid. During DPS it'll be on a timer and will need shooting before the timer runs out, as otherwise the entire team will be wiped. A fusion is usually good for this, and you'll want to shoot it as late as possible, but you can shoot it anytime during DPS. However, doing so will actually stop the DPS phase, so that's why you want to shoot it as late as physically possible. Speaking of DPS, Crow takes more damage from swords and deals a lot of damage close up. So use swords like Lament and a surrounded sword if your team is coordinated enough to make that work, and bring plenty of wells because Crow will kill it in like 2 hits. With a decent setup you'll probably 2-phase him, and that's about it. The final stand isn't too special, it's just a tight DPS check because you can only pop the Oversoul once, and it'll infinitely respawn until Crow or you are dead. And that's literally it. That's all there is to do when killing Crow. It just boils down to kill some ads, wait a bit, hit Crow with a sword, and then do it some more. Which isn't the worst mechanic, definitely an improvement over the original Crow's End, but nothing really special I guess. Going back to the run comparison, at least the whole shoot the thing, run to the other thing and shoot it was fun to do, and Nezarek himself had the poker stick that required you to shoot his weak spots, and the one mechanic was also interesting, with again requiring that you shoot his weak spots for info, and then shooting the opposite node toward he glows and bringing it to the other side. That, whilst easy, is at least interesting to do instead of just shoot the ads and wait for about 5 minutes. I obviously think Crow suffers in the mechanics department, as it doesn't really match up to other bosses at all. Even Argos from Meter of Worlds was more fun to do despite being easy both difficulty and mechanically wise, but that was still, like Nezarek, an interesting and new mechanic. So overall I'm just kind of upset Crow's End just hasn't lived up to the difficulty of the contest mode, since that was very difficult and very fun. This obviously isn't me saying the game should be contest all around. That would be dumb, even though I'd love the ability to lower my power level by however much I want, especially if I get more rewards. The point is that it was incredibly difficult and therefore more fun for me to play. I was literally in the zone, as one would say, making incredibly high level plays that I literally would have never done before, as I wouldn't need to, and spend literally 10 hours straight on a Ute very happily and enjoyed every second. So it's sad to see how it immediately went to being incredibly easy. Like, I'm genuinely not joking when I say I literally just browse Twitter in most of my runs. and I know they can make the raid live up to contest difficulty because Vow did. Vow was very hard mechanically and definitely lived up to the challenge it posed on contest. And yes, I'm comparing a paid raid versus a free-to-play raid, but I feel we need at least an intermediate or really difficult raid for free-to-players. Since Vogue and Kingsfall serve completely different levels, that I think at the very least we need something in the middle of those two, as I would consider Vogue to be probably one of the easiest raids in the game and Kingsfall to be one of the harder ones. And therefore would probably be quite the whiplash for those players to go from a raid that is mostly just killing stuff to actual mechanics. So yeah, I know Ref would probably live up to that if they did bring it back, so could Scourge or Leviathan, which would be quite nice, but we don't even know what raid they're going to actually bring back next year. That's all I gotta say for today, however. March update first impressions video, hopefully near the weekend, so if you want to see that, then I'll go back to the usual weapon reviews and whatever. Like, sub, comment, usual stuff, and adios.